Bouchard. I am our Edge Director at our high school, at our Orion campus, and I got a couple friends here with me. We got Jalen. Jalen, you want to tell everybody what you do?
Yeah, I'm actually on staff at the Troy campus as the Worship Arts Director there. Yeah, I've been there for probably, it'll be 3 years this month.
Yeah.
Awesome. Crazy.
And I'm Maggie. I grew up at Kensington actually throughout my whole life, so went through student ministries, all of that, and then after high school I interned at Kensington and now go to school, but I'm back over the summer, so yeah.
Well, thanks guys for joining us. We're having a little quick conversation. Hopefully it's one of many, talking about justice, talking about race, and talking about really everything everyone else is talking about right now. We're grateful that you were willing and so eager to come and talk to our students. And we've got a couple of questions that we're going to ask, questions that mostly that have come from them and from their leaders. And we want to make sure in all of our conversations we are leading people towards Christ. Yeah. And so to kind of start this all off, I do want to give a framework for where we're going to begin this conversation from. So these are the things that we believe in first, and we're starting from these points. So the first thing that when it comes to talking about justice, the first thing that we stand on is we believe that all people are created equal, and we all carry the exact same image from God. From our very beginning of our story, he placed his image and his worth and his value upon us, and we believe that every single human has that. So we start there. The second thing that we are framing this with is we believe first and foremost that Jesus has given us one command, and it is to love God. How? By loving others as we love ourselves, by loving our neighbors, every single one of them. So we also start there. And then the last thing that I think that this world needs a lot more of is this principle that James gave to the first believers in the first church. He said that no matter where we are, no matter what conversation we find ourselves having, we are to be quick to listen first, and then slow to speak, and even slower to becoming angry. And so we begin with those three things. That is our starting point for our questions.
Beautiful.
Okay. So as we go through this, if you guys have anything you want to add, or if you want to interrupt me or jump in, go ahead, because I sometimes talk too much, as you've seen already. So our first question, this is, I think, very pertinent for everybody, but especially for students. So the question is, what role does social media play in seeking justice? Because we believe it has a role, but what is that?
Yeah, social media is like the thing right now, and so for me, I've always been on the slower end of understanding it, mostly because time hasn't really permitted. And then plus I think when I was graduating high school, Instagram was just coming on the scene. But the thing is social media, that platform gives people a voice and a platform to express their opinion and express themselves or display what they want people to see of themselves. So I think a lot of what we see right now and the heightened nature of it revolves around the fact that there is social media right now. Mm-hmm. And so the role that I see is I see it playing a very key and important role in it, as far as how you use your voice to express what you believe to be God's heart is, but also I've seen it be pretty destructive as well. Yeah. I've seen a lot of people tearing people down on there, attacking each other, things like that. I think that social media has a role to play, but it's only best used by way of promoting peace.
Yes.
And not as a ground to duke a fight out. I don't know if you get anything there.
I was gonna say that's really good. I've also struggled with that question a lot, just because you're right, there's been so many different things on social media, and something I was thinking about last week particularly was just the distinction between righteousness and self-righteousness when it comes to social media. And I think that that's a hard line to walk sometimes, but I think that ultimately you're right, it is a platform to be able to share important things that need to be shared right now, which I know we're going to talk more about what exactly those things are. But I think there also sometimes I've seen, honestly, Christians almost pointed at other Christians, and there's goodness in calling people up and rising people up, but I've almost seen more tension between like Christians than anybody else in certain situations and with certain posts. And so I think it's just important that we're in whatever we're doing, including social media, like checking our hearts, like, am I posting this for my own gain or because I want to be seen as somebody engaging this conversation, or is my heart really in this? And just, yeah, Jesus is always somebody who looks at the heart above outward appearances, and I think that includes the outward appearance of what comes on social media. And so taking a step to look beyond that is super important in just kind of a self-evaluative way. And that's not to say that if your motives aren't 100% perfect, God's not going to use it, because, God uses imperfect people. But anyways, those have been some of my thoughts about social media.
Yeah, that's great. I like what you said, Maggie. I really do think you need, before you post, like, this is something I do, because, I've been posting a lot, like, in the midst of all of this, and, like, I think it's really important that before you post, pray, and really examine what you're posting, and say, hey, is this peaceful? Is this promoting and bringing forth God's kingdom? Now, the thing is, it's like, I'm not talking about peace based on whether it will line up with what somebody else thinks. I'm talking about peace as in, like, is this promoting and building the kingdom of God?
Yeah, does this conversation move us forward?
Exactly.
Or does it, like, entrench me and others further in what we already, what we already believe or what we already want to be true? Yeah. So do you think students should be posting things?
I think so. I do.
Yeah.
I think students should. And I think what they should be doing is when they should post to advance the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so, like, and I know we'll get into talking about a little bit more about that. I don't think that they should post, like, without thinking,
Right.
Definitely. But they should post to bring peace to our communities and bring peace to our relationships. And they should post to support the idea of all humanity being seen, loved, and cared for.
Yeah. And I think in doing so, like, we will find a lot of fruit in that. Like, when Jesus, I love his Sermon on the Mount, and the lens that he gives us for the whole sermon starts with the Beatitudes. Yeah. And one of the things he says is, he said, blessed are the peacemakers, not the peaceful,
right.
Not the ones who are just quiet and silent. He says, those who make peace, there are blessings that you will find in that. So I think it's like you say, it's a good thing. If we're seeking to advance kingdom and to advance God's love, we will find some fruit in that.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So there's a common argument that I find that goes back and forth, where we hear one person will say Black Lives Matter, and then somebody else will immediately jump in with what? All lives matter or Blue Lives Matter. So I would bet there are students who wonder, what do I do and what do I say when people say that?
Well, there are two things that are happening that in these conversations that I've noticed a lot of people aren't aware of, right? So you have the statement Black Lives Matter, and then you have the movement Black Lives Matter, right? And a lot of times people won't differentiate the two. So for example, I believe that there are places and things like that can be debated within the Black Lives Matter movement as to, like, what it supports or what it says and things like that. Those are the conversations I'm uninterested in, like, about people arguing what the movement represents and things like that. I'm more concerned about the statement, right? So the statement Black Lives Matter in no way, right, demeans or lessens the fact that other lives matter as well, right?
Yeah.
So, I had a good conversation with Dave Wilson, who's one of our founders, and we were talking about this whole thing as well. And so I basically kind of said it like this. It's like, if we all live in a neighborhood, right? If we all live in a neighborhood, and I run out of my house, and I say, my house is on fire, my phone is in the house, hey, Michael, hey, Maggie, can you all call the fire department, for me?
Yeah. And
you all responded with, well, our houses matter too. that's a little bit strange, you know, because your house isn't on fire. Mine is.
And
know?
You're not saying my house doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm not saying yours doesn't matter at all. Actually, it does, you know. But the thing is, yours isn't on fire. So what that leads us into is a conversation about, well, blacks are saying that, hey, well, we've been experiencing pain in a way that is different and even more, I would probably say, more likely or at a higher rate than the white community has been experiencing pain.
Yeah.
And so I try to say that carefully because, like, a lot of that language can be charged.
Sure.
You know? And so I would say this, is just like, now if the argument is more about are blacks playing the victim card and are they really, like, experiencing pain, well, let's have that argument instead of having the argument on semantics.
Yes.
You know? And so, like, I think that the conversation about whether you believe black people are disproportionately experiencing pain when compared to white people, that's a constructive conversation and a constructive argument. Arguing about whether all lives matter versus black lives matter is semantics and is irrelevant in my opinion. Irrelevant in my opinion.
I think you're absolutely right. Like, the argument isn't even the words itself.
No.
It's the things that aren't spoken and aren't said.
Right.
Which Jesus, whenever people would do that to him, which they did a lot, even when people, when they asked him, who is my neighbor? You know, when he would say, love your neighbor, they would say, who is my neighbor? And he knew that what they were arguing was not so much about their neighbor, it was about what was in their own hearts that was being unspoken. Right?
Exactly.
And, you know, so I think it's super important that we, you know, differentiate.
I agree. I agree.
So this question, and Maggie, you can probably speak into this too. How, for us, speaking on behalf of teenagers, how can we as teenagers engage in constructive conversations at home? So conversations that lead somewhere in our homes or in our schools or with our families about race. How do we get to those kind of conversations?
Yeah, I think first with humility. I think that's honestly been a really difficult thing. Not just in general. I feel like my fear in entering into conversations is like, well, I'm ill-equipped. Like I don't know how to have these conversations, and especially like from white person to white person, just in general, whether that's conversations with friends or family or whoever it is. It's like sometimes we just hit this wall of like. Racism is a thing, and Jesus says this, and okay, then now what? And it can be hard to kind of move past that wall, but something, regardless, I've just kind of realized is like enter in even if it's uncomfortable. That's not to say to enter in without having researched or trying to learn. But again, I think if you're trying to start a conversation, it's always good to just be like, hey, honestly, I'm just going to start by saying I don't have all the answers, and I don't know everything, but I think that this is a conversation that's important anyways, and so let's enter into it anyways, even if it's uncomfortable, even if there's going to have to be more and more follow-up conversations. Like, let's not be afraid of that simply because of that. And then when it comes to conversations that maybe lead to more tension, I think what I've realized is slowly, like, just the importance of listening to any of the sides, whether extreme one way, extreme the other way, because ultimately nothing goes anywhere if you don't listen first. And that's not to say that you don't push back or you don't say, hey, actually, I think, what about this? That's not to say that you don't enter into those harder questions or ask those hard things. But I think that it's important that we are willing to have those conversations, especially when it comes to those conversations with family or things like that. There's, I think, a level of understanding that needs to be reached before we talk about the misunderstandings or the differences, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that, like, as you engage in conversations in your home, listening is key, but also, like, do the work. I've been using that phrase a lot. I mean, do the work in the sense of, like, there are things to be learned. A lot of you students, like, you are, like, working hard in high school creating research papers, even in middle school. Like,
Yeah.
I remember, I think I did my first research paper in like 6th grade or something, where they were teaching me how to cite sources and things like that. You have access to all kinds of things, like to actually dive in and do research for yourself.
Yeah.
And what I would really challenge you all to say is, like, before you form an opinion, all right? Or I would say, as you begin to form your opinion, do the work.
Yeah.
Like, research and make sure you understand where we're coming from. Like as a community of people within America, understand where we've come from. Understand our nation's history.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff will give you so much context for where we are. Now, a lot of people are arguing and things like that, like let's leave the past in the past. A lot of the reasons why we're struggling right now is because we can't leave the past alone. Well, I'm just a huge believer that the past tells you where you've come from.
Sure.
That the past explains why you are where you are. And so, like, the thing is like, to understand where we've come from as a nation, right? To understand the aspects of the Civil War or slavery, to understand Jim Crow laws, to understand the Civil Rights Movement, to understand the Civil Rights Act of 1968, all this stuff, like literally, like, to understand these things are imperative. Like, you need to dive in to do it, because it will inform what becomes your opinion about the state of things. So I'll say, enter in those conversations, also being willing to go back and do the work.
Yeah.
Also being willing to go back and research what you've discussed. Also enter into those conversations peacefully as well. Don't come into the conversation in arms, ready to duke it out. That's not a conversation at all. That's a fight, you know? So, like, engage in conversations, not fights.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Well, context is the way of Jesus.
100%.
I mean, like, with him coming here and showing us who God was, God didn't stand on high and proclaim things from heaven the entire time, saying, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Jesus was him coming here to be with us. So he, if anything, he shows us that context matters. Because if it matters to God, it should matter to us. And I think also, like, look at Paul, the way that he evangelized and told the good news to other places he had never been before, in different cultures he had never been before. He went in and studied them. Like, there were times that he would quote other quote other poets and different authors from different cultures. How did he do that? Because he studied, right? And then he would use that to lead people closer to Jesus. And I think we do this, like, with our own stories. Even when we try to teach people how to give the story of Jesus to other people, we talk about often one of the tools we say, well, think about who you were before you met Christ and who you were after. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we give context to that. So it is important that we become good students of our culture and of other cultures to be able to walk into these conversations well. Yeah. All right, so switching more to the practical side of things, questions from students. An important question from students is this: what are the practical things that we can do to make a difference? So for middle schoolers and high schoolers, what can they do?
Well, I think our past informs and gives us the vision of where we are. And in order to really understand where we are in society, we have to open up the history book. Yeah. And so I would say, ask questions and enter into these conversations being informed and have history. Also, widen your lens. Yeah. Like, let's all move towards the idea of getting a bigger picture of God's humanity. And what I mean by that is I'm not telling you to go and just find a black person to be friends with. Like, that's not helpful in any way. That's tokenism.
I choose you.
Right, exactly. I mean, like, it's also not posting the next picture with a black person on Instagram either. Like, saying, this is my friend. Like, that's not helpful at all, right? Right. What is helpful is widening your lens and allowing other people and their lenses to come and influence your view of humanity. Like, the thing is pursuing relationships with people that don't necessarily look like you. They may not come from the same economic status as you. They may not even share the same worldview as you. And so the thing is that is what will begin to widen your lens. We were talking a little bit earlier. I believe there are things like your lens will always be influenced. There are things that can obstruct it, and there are things that can inform it. Yeah. We should be pursuing relationships that inform our lenses. Yes. And so, yeah, that's kind of like an action step that I think is like dive into your history book and pursue relationships with people that are different than you.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, I don't have a ton to add to that, but I know you and I, we had a conversation about a week ago, and we just talked about kind of the importance of searching our own hearts, too, as kind of a tangible action step. And it got me thinking about Psalm 139. The very end of that verse talks about, like, God, know me, search me, know my heart, know if there's any evil way in me. And I think it's very easy in this day and age to be like, okay, God, search their hearts. Fix
Right.
them. But that's not what that says. It says, like, search me, God. Like, what are the things in me that maybe I wasn't aware of that I need to shift? What do I need to know? And, yeah, so I think it's just important that we're asking ourselves those questions. And that's a process. That's an ongoing thing. That's not like a one and done, I sat and thought about it for 5 minutes sort of thing. But just ongoing asking those questions. And then also just if somebody says something that you know is out of line, like, not being afraid to call on that, and like being willing to stand up when you know something is just blatantly wrong.
Yeah. You know, I love what you said about searching the heart, and I kind of said this to our wider community as well on last weekend. It's just like, and I think it's true for students as well. We're all gifted. Like, we all are uniquely designed, and I know you all spend a lot of time talking to students about this stuff. It's like everybody has something to bring to the table.
Yeah.
Right? Like for me, like I'm a musician. I've always connected through music, like connected with God and with people through music, you know. And I also like everybody has their own sets of gifts and talents that the Lord has entrusted to them. I think the key is like as you're searching your heart and you're saying, Lord, clean out anything that's not like you in there, right? Yeah. Also realize what you have. Realize the ways that you've been gifted and use that to offer up to serve God's kingdom, to serve humanity. If you're a musician, like how can you use your influence in music to bring healing to humanity, right? If you are like a really smart student and like you're like books and diving into writing and things like that is like something that you're gifted in, write something. Yeah. Write a piece for people to hear and read and listen to and help it to touch and inform our hearts and things like that. Like everybody has something that they can offer. And so as you do that, offer that up and let it serve humanity. So search your heart, right? Ask the Lord to, remove anything that's not like him. Do the work, learn your history, take what you've been given and offer it up and serve humanity with it. Yeah. Those are the action steps that I really believe that we should be stepping into as an entire community, students as well. Yeah,
that's how we make that peace.
Exactly.
That's how we become peacemakers.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I know something kind of just jumping off of that, something you kind of brought up to me last week is the fact that, like, everybody, because they are surrounded by different circles of people, like, has a unique opportunity and is placed in different conversations and can enter into those with a purpose, whether or not, like, whatever circle you're surrounded by. And that was something you reminded me of last week, and I think that's powerful, especially when it comes to just being a student. I think sometimes it can feel like, oh, well, what do I have to say? Is it really worth it? Like, is anybody going to listen to me? I'm in middle school, I'm in high school, but I think some of the most powerful moments I had between other people were in middle school and high school and like entering into hard conversations. So like, I don't know, I guess I just wanted to like encourage that too. Like that is exactly right. Like for anyone, whatever age you are, what you said.
Yeah. And I would say if I had like one thought, for the students is that like, I know a lot of you all have been told since elementary school, like you are our future, right? You are the leaders of tomorrow. Or whatever else like that. And you've heard that so many times that it's probably had less weight each time you've heard it. But I think right now with our present reality and things that are going on in the world, it really is going to take your generation to change it. Yes. It really is. Like your generation will bring the healing, right? The generations before your generation will continue to argue and fight, right? Because like we are so engulfed in some ways. I'd even say the millennial generation is in ways as well. Like we're so engulfed and so indoctrinated in what we believe, right? That all we will do is really continue to fight. There will be moments of peace, I believe. I believe that we will find peace in certain moments, right? But I believe you all, in looking to your generation, right, have the ability to change this and bring lasting change in it. Yes. I really do. And so I almost like it's a heavy weight, but I almost put the responsibility to say, hey, I trust you with our future.
Yeah.
I really do. Yeah. I think the thing is I've been saying this a lot. It's like we've heard the phrase a lot of times, we're better together. I mean, I really believe that. Like, God designed the gospel to work for the full humanity. We talked about Ephesians 2 in the big church this past weekend. And really, that's where Paul is letting us know that the gospel is not just a personal thing. It's not just that Jesus died for you so that you can have community with him and go to live with him forever after you pass away. You know, the gospel is wider than that. Paul tells us in Ephesians 2 that when Jesus sacrificed his life the way that he did, gave his life for us, he tore down the dividing wall of hostility. Meaning that he's bringing together one new humanity. That's the language that Paul uses. Out of the two, right? Out of all of our differences, right? Out of all the things that make us different, right? And make us diverse, the Lord came in, gave his life so that we can come together as one new humanity, fighting and serving each other, fighting for and serving each other. And so that is what the gospel is all about. We need each other. We need each other in order to make this thing work. Yeah. And the gospel will only move forward effectively and successfully when we choose to come together.
Yeah. Even in the full picture of heaven for the future, at the end of Revelation, every tribe, every tongue, and that anything we do that doesn't lead towards that actually works against the kingdom, 100%. Right? And so we want to make sure that we are on the right side of that, you know.
Exactly. Like, everything has to be geared towards the kingdom. And I would say this too. The gospel is uncomfortable. It is. It challenges the deepest parts of you, right? And it calls you to rise up and become more like Christ. That's the whole point. Like, is to rid ourselves of ourself and put on Jesus. That's the whole point of the journey of being a Christian. So the thing that I've been challenging people with is, if these conversations in a spiritual sense, right, make you uncomfortable, maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe Christ is using this to challenge you in a way to push you to becoming more like he is. If you leave a message and you feel great about yourself all the time, right? There has to be a balance of encouragement and challenge.
Yes.
And I believe this time that we're in right now, right, is a time of challenge for the church. It's a season where the Lord is challenging us to really see each other as important parts of the body that makes up Christ.
Yeah. All right, so I don't even know where to begin with this. What are some good resources and books for middle schoolers and high schoolers to pursue so they can better be prepared to have these kind of conversations?
Yeah, that's kind of tough, because like the one thing I can say is like when you really start diving into this stuff, some of it gets pretty intense, and so you do have to go into an understanding that when you start looking at like race relations in the past and you start talking about even hate groups or things like that, it can get pretty intense. Yeah. But one thing I can say that is a good resource too is just simply reading some of the documents of our nation. So like go and look at like the Civil Rights Act. Yeah. Like look at there's two of them. There's 64 and 67. Yeah, those are the two Civil Rights Acts when they were passed. You go and just read those documents. You could go and read the Emancipation. Read the Emancipation Proclamation. Also, you can read things like the 15th Amendment and really study those. Study what that was all about and things like that. But then also there's, there are different group studies you could do. There's one by Latasha Morrison called Be the Bridge, and like it would be great to, especially for you high school students, to get that book and maybe read it in a community with a few friends. It's got all kinds of action steps and things like conversations to have out of, different studies. Another action step is when things start opening back up and things maybe get back to normal. There's an African American History Museum right down in Detroit called the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. go take a tour. I think like for students, I think it's like $3 or something like that to enter in. Take some friends down there and just check it out. You know, if you enjoy music, like the Hitsfield Museum has a bunch. It's the Motown Museum right down in Detroit as well. Has a bunch of history about what music meant through the civil rights movement. Yeah. And things like that. There's tons of things available out there and tons of ways for you all to get involved. Maybe a group of you and your friends, you know, get a parent to take you down to the Hitsfield Museum or the Charles
Get
H.
your
Fred
small
Museum.
group together and go with them.
Whatever. And then like I would really say Be the Bridge, the book by Latasha Morrison, that would be a good one. I would probably say more geared towards our high school and even college crowd of readers.
Okay.
But it would be I think it's a great start. Yeah, cool. Definitely.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't think I have many additions when it comes to just what you said, like resources about civil rights and about the history. I think you have a lot more information on that. I guess my only addition would be just like when it comes to how to respond and really what Jesus would be doing in these situations, to just go straight to the Bible. Like I'll be honest, and I'll be the last couple of days you see the verses that are posted on Instagram, but which are great and so powerful, but so often I forget to just like open my Bible and start looking at other places for myself. And last night even I just was opening my Bible and I was like, wow, this is so relatable. Why did this is so relevant to what is going on right now. Why did I not like really dive in sooner? And I think that that's also super important. Again, not I think hand in hand with understanding history better. 100%. And all of that. So
yeah, I love that. I mean, you have to. You as a Christ follower, there's just no other choice. Like if you really want to be about bringing the gospel, or as Jesus taught us to pray, if you are interested in bringing pieces of God's kingdom right here to earth as it is in heaven, you know, if you're interested in doing that, you have to be in communion with Him.
Yes.
And what that means is you have to be a student of the Word of God.
Yeah.
You do. You have to be a student of the Word of God. You can't necessarily interpret God's heart, you know, and become more like Jesus without allowing Him to talk to you.
Yeah.
And you allow Him to talk to you by diving into your Word. And like you said, it's extremely relevant. It's extremely relevant to where we are now and where we will be. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's key.
Yeah, it's hard to be like Jesus if you don't know what He did.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Awesome. I remember my first like big boy job out of school was I was an administrator at a college, and my job in the recruiting office, and my job was to process test scores. Mm-hmm. And I would see inner city test scores come in, students from the inner city, and I would see that they would have high GPAs. Yeah. Like I would see like 3.8s, 3.9s, and then I would see like a 1030, a 1040 on the SAT, or even like a 15 or 16 on the ACT, and
right.
It just didn't make sense. And then I would take a transcript from a suburban school, and I would see like a 3.5 student with a 32 on the ACT,
right.
Or a huge great score on the SAT and things like that. There's disparity in the education system,
right?
And I say understanding that also students come from a different world in a way. Yeah. Students from the inner city and the suburbs, there's a huge difference. So engaging with other communities, I think one awesome thing is like I got to give a plug to like Renee Mullenix and the work that she's done with Kaleo, Renee and Nancy Zott, the work that they've done with like Shiloh. Mm-hmm. Connecting with kids through the inner city, connecting suburban kids and inner city kids together through art. That's a beautiful merger.
Right.
Any way you can find a way as a student to come into community with people from different backgrounds is beautiful. And also understanding their story, understanding that their schools look different than yours do. Yeah. You know? Yeah.
I guess to add to that, not simply talking about different school districts, but within even your own school district, and just I guess what it looks like to be aware in that. I went to Avondale. I only graduated a few years ago, so I'm not super far out. But I grew up in Avondale, and Avondale is a pretty diverse district, at least relative to I know to some. And so kind of growing up in there even, I guess I assumed I was more aware than I truly was. And my sister and I, even just this last week, we have been talking about certain interactions we had in high school, and we've really been just opened up to, wow, there were so many differences even within what appeared to be such a diverse community, and what was such a diverse community, just in relation to what people's experiences really were, that maybe we didn't notice. So I think even it can be easy, or at least I found it easy in my own life, to maybe dismiss the things that I really didn't understand because of who I was surrounded by. And I think not dismissing the differences is really important, and something that over the last week and over the last couple of years I've definitely been just realizing more and more.
That's awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks again for joining us. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the students?
Now, I'll just say I really do think that the Lord has designed you for such a time as this.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And I think that you all will be the image bearers and the light carriers that will change the narrative of this horror story in a way.
Yeah.
You know, it's an uncomfortable time right now, but you are our hope. You are our hope. And I have hope because I have you. So
Awesome.
Definitely, I would just really empower you, and I'm praying for your community, praying for each and every one of you that the Lord will embolden you and give you the courage to step into these kinds of conversations and situations and be His hands and feet. Yeah.
Awesome.
I guess I'd add, like, God always works in the unqualified. So, like, if you don't feel like you're able to step in, that's where God thrives. And again, that's not to discount that. Get educated, like, go into those things, but also know that, like, it's God who's working. It's God who wants to move in this situation even more than we want to, because this is about His children. This is about His creation. This is about His world that He created. So yeah, I guess I would just say, like, don't be afraid of that.
Well, thank you to the students who have been tuning in and the parents who've been watching this too. If you have any further questions, just send them our way. You can either put them in comments or you can send us an email. Reach out to us. We'd love to keep the conversation going, because we know this isn't just the end of something. This is the beginning of something. Actually, it's been on for a while. We're just stepping into it right now, so we want to make sure that this continues. So, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you on next time.